Upon defeating the beast horde in Jiangqing City, Lin Chia and his team didn't immediately leave but instead began drawing forbidden spells. Considering it would be troublesome to transport individual plots of land, Lin Chia simply cut down an entire mountain peak and carved forbidden spell formations on its surface. At this moment, 3 massive forbidden spells were already overlapping on this mountain peak. Creating these 3 forbidden spells consumed too much of Lin Chia's mental energy. Considering they still needed to transport the mountain peak to the front lines, everyone decided not to use the somersault cloud, but instead flew slowly alongside the mountain. What exactly is this forbidden spell mountain? Teacher Chen sat at the front of the carriage looking at the distant mountain peak, not understanding its purpose. Not only Teacher Chen, but the same confusion also existed in the minds of all human powerhouses and special teams. They didn't know much about magic, let alone forbidden spells. They weren't clear about what those glowing patterns on the mountain peak actually meant. Since you've prepared a special method, use it now, Left Qing said solemnly. This is not the time to hold back. Chinen Pass won't last much longer. Understood. Lin Chia nodded slightly. With a gentle flip of his virtual grip, the suspended black mountain peak moved to the core area of the beast tide. Countless divine beasts and giant beasts fell from the mother beast in the divine battle, gathering and surging here, making it the area with the highest beast density on the entire battlefield. The intrusion of the floating mountain immediately attracted the 2-headed bird flocks circling in the sky. They hovered around the mountain peak, seemingly confused. This mountain peak had no trace of life energy. Apart from some patterns on its surface, there was nothing unusual about it. In the eyes of these hybrid divine beasts with limited intelligence, it was an unknown entity with almost no danger. Lin Chia looked back at everyone. Jiang Er and Chao Yuan nodded slightly, simultaneously raising their hands and placing them on Lin Chia's wrist. The 2 small golden dragons moving around their wrists quickly swam over and wrapped around Lin Chia's wrist, merging with the originally dim golden dragon. On this battlefield, Jiang Er's role was very limited and didn't require such a massive amount of mental power. Chao Yuan's strength came entirely from the Black King and similarly didn't need the small golden dragon. Both transferred their national fortune to Lin Chia, maximizing the conversion of resources. With the 2 small golden dragons entering his hand, the golden dragon on Lin Chia's wrist immediately became solid. Surging national fortune rolled around Lin Chia. He took a deep breath and a brilliant reverse summoning formation opened beneath his feet. With a flash of light, his figure instantly disappeared from the spot. At the same time, at the top of the floating mountain peak surrounded by 2-headed birds, next to a snow-white blade inserted into the rock, Lin Chia's form appeared. To activate these forbidden spells, Lin Chia needed to infuse his mental power into them, so he had to be within the range of this mountain peak. However, if he were here, the mountain peak might be surrounded before reaching the densest part of the beast tide. Therefore, using the reverse summoning formation to teleport directly was the best choice. Lin Chia's sudden appearance immediately angered several 2-headed birds nearby. They screeched and charged toward him simultaneously. Help me hold them off. With one hand gripping the handle of White Slash, several summoning formations opened in the void beside Lin Chia, and multiple Klein-level guardians rushed out, surrounding him. Lin Chia completely ignored the battle around him, slowly closing his eyes as massive amounts of mental power flowed through the blade handle directly into the mountain peak beneath his feet. A purple magic pattern first lit up on the smooth bottom of the mountain peak, like countless violet flames igniting circuits, directly facing the surging beast horde below. As a deep chant emanated from Lin Chia's throat, a terrifying magical aura suddenly spread. What is that upside-down gas stove hanging in the sky? At the rear of the battle line, many figures guarding the outer wall of Chinen Pass looked at the illuminated forbidden spell formation with confusion. I don't know, but it looks powerful. It was created by the Nightfall team. Perhaps it's the trump card of that legendary Captain Lin? Is he really going to be okay charging so deep into enemy territory alone? What is he trying to do? Amid everyone's confused voices, the purple pattern hanging directly above the beast horde grew increasingly bright. The terrifying aura it emitted even attracted the attention of some beings in the divine battlefield. However, under the frenzied counterattack of the great Xia gods, the Indian gods had neither time nor energy to interfere. Their defensive circle was constantly shrinking, and gaps continued to appear despite their efforts, with casualties gradually increasing. As Lin Chia uttered the final syllable, his eyes were tinged with a purple hue. Gripping the handle of white/, tightly he slowly spoke. Forbidden spell, Eye of Solomon. Dark purple flames ignited within the magic array, instantly transforming into a jet of fire plummeting toward the ground. The flames struck the surface, immediately incinerating dozens of giant beasts, then rolled outward in all directions like waves, as if someone had poured a bucket of scalding lava from the sky, engulfing the dense beast tide. Shrill howls emanated from the dark purple sea of fire, gradually weakening. After 7 or 8 seconds, nearly 80% of the beasts in this area had been reduced to ashes. Only Divine Realm beasts frantically escaped the fire's coverage, their bodies already severely charred, with purple flames still clinging to their surfaces, inflicting unprecedented pain. The dark purple sea of fire covered the ground for about 15 seconds before gradually dissipating. On the covered ground, the outline of an eye pupil woven from purple flames gradually took shape, as if carved into the ground, slowly burning. The floating mountain peak was positioned at the densest core of the beast tide, and the fire's coverage was extremely extensive. In just 15 seconds, at least 50 Klein-level giant beasts were burned to ashes. Although no Divine Realm beasts died, almost all were severely injured. Looking at the vacuum area at the rear of the beast tide, shock appeared in the eyes of the many human powerhouses present. They never imagined that the battlefield weapon Forbidden Spell Mountain mentioned by Lin Chia could exert such terrifying power. Just this one forbidden spell reduced the pressure on Chin'an Pass by nearly 20%. This was undoubtedly excellent news for Chin'an Pass in its current situation. Lin Chia, how many more times can you release such an attack? Left Qing recovered from the devastating strike produced by the Eye of Solomon, and immediately asked. Twice. Lin Chia paused for a moment. Each forbidden spell was different, but the destructive power was about the same. Solomon's Eye was a forbidden spell Lin Chia found in Merlin's Forbidden Spell Grimoire that had a relatively large area of effect and a quick activation ritual. Although there were even more powerful and wider-ranging forbidden spells in the grimoire, they all required extremely long incantation times, some even needing a full 3 days of chanting to release. The only flaw was that its area damage was somewhat insufficient and couldn't cause fatal damage to divine beasts, mainly targeting creatures below the divine realm. Good, control the timing and location of your releases yourself, and try to extend the duration of each release as much as possible while ensuring your own safety, Suqing instructed solemnly. Lin Chia could certainly release all 3 forbidden spells at once, directly reducing the beast tide facing Chin'an Gate by half, but this effect wouldn't last long. With the current breeding speed of the mother beasts, it might only create a vacuum period of 1 or 2 minutes, after which Chin'an Gate would face an even more intense attack than before. Before the mother beasts were killed, making the best use of each forbidden spell release to relieve pressure on Chin'an Gate at critical moments was the most effective approach. Lin Chia naturally understood this reasoning. He scanned his surroundings and nodded, I'll do my best. The damage from the first forbidden spell created a large vacuum area below the floating mountain peak. However, after this, the beast tide also realized the terror of this mountain peak and would inevitably divert part of the beast horde to destroy it, at which point Lin Chia's situation would become extremely dangerous. But this was exactly what Lin Chia wanted. Diverting the beast horde to destroy the mountain peak meant reducing the pressure on Chin'an Gate, which was the offensive-defensive strategy that Qingyu had first proposed based on the characteristics of the floating mountain peak. Looking at the roaring torrent of giant beasts surging from the distance, Lin Chia's expression didn't change at all. He stood alone on the mountaintop in the night, his sword blade reflecting the ferocity of the beast horde. At the front line of the battlefield, Qingyu and the other 3 looked at the distant mountain peak, their 4 deep red cloaks fluttering in the wind. Are we really not going to help him? Jiang Air floated in the air, her voice coming through the speaker. No need. 7 knows what to do, and even if he really gets into a passive situation he can come back directly through reverse summoning. And Qingyu pointed to a straight knife tied to the coffin board and said, 7 is dispersing and delaying the beast tide in the enemy's interior, while we just need to guard the front line and share the pressure for Chin'an Gate. Are we going to act separately or together? Chao Yuan asked, holding the straight knife. Let's act separately, Bai Li Pang Pang nodded slightly. The small golden dragon on his wrist circulated, and a Taiji 8 trigrams diagram bloomed beneath his feet, extending seemingly endlessly in all directions, covering a large part of the battlefield. He calmly said, "With the national fortune on me, I can expand this domain infinitely. If you encounter any enemies you can't handle, just call out through Jiang Air's signal, and we'll immediately teleport the others over." "That's best," and Qingyu nodded. And Qingyu, carrying the black coffin, dispersed with Chao Yuan, leaving only Bai Li Pang Pang standing alone. He formed hand seals, and the 8 trigram symbols surrounding him lit up one by one, continuously striking and killing nearby giant beasts. Meanwhile, in the middle of the battlefield, has 7 already become this powerful? When Qimo recalled the world-destroying strike just now and couldn't help saying, "Indeed, prodigies are prodigies no matter where they are." Redding looked at that distant figure, worry appearing in her eyes. Will 7 be all right by himself behind the beast tide? Don't worry, if he dared to go, he must have made preparations. When Qimo looked around and said, "Rather than worrying about that guy, we should worry about the giant beasts around us." Redding turned to look and saw another batch of huge beast shadows charging from the distance. One of them was sprinting straight toward their position on the outer wall, releasing a heart-palpitating aura. Redding took a deep breath. Rose-colored flames once again enveloped her entire body, her spear gripped tightly in hand, her gaze full of gravity. "My weapon is most suitable for frontal combat. I'll hold it off at the front." Redding and Qimo, you maneuver from the sides. Molly shouldered her broadsword and walked heavily in front of Redding, the ground beneath her feet trembling slightly. Redding was silent for a moment but then nodded, "All right." As the Klein giant beast rapidly approached, Molly roared, her foot instantly shattering the ground. Her high-frequency vibrating broadsword cut through the air, slashing toward the giant beast's claws. Clang! With the enhancement of myriad vibrations, Molly's damage and strength were extremely powerful, but facing a frontal attack from a Klein-level giant beast, she still violently spat out a mouthful of blood and was knocked back. She staggered back several steps and a rose-colored flame-wrapped spear thrust out rapidly, blocking a claw strike for her. Just as Molly forcibly steadied herself and prepared to attack again, a bolt of yang lightning instantly split the sky, precisely striking the giant beast's head. The terrifying power contained in this yang lightning directly blasted a bloody hole in the giant beast's head. Its body froze and fell straight forward, then was cut in half by the following broadsword. Hot blood splashed on Molly's arm. She stared at the limp beast corpse on the ground and the charred lightning mark standing there in a daze. "There's another one." Red Ying's peripheral vision caught something behind Molly. She shouted and thrust her spear forward. Slash. However, before the giant beast could get close to Molly, another bolt of yang lightning descended from the sky, directly shattering its skull. With a dull sound, the giant beast fell to the ground, completely losing its breath. The consecutive bolts of yang lightning surprised Redding and Wen Qimo, who had prepared for a desperate fight. They looked down and saw that at some point, a corner of a Taiji 8 trigrams formation had extended beneath them, with a Jin trigram symbol slowly glowing. "If I remember correctly, this lightning should be the technique of Seven's teammate, right?" When Qimo recalled the fat figure in the smoke earlier and thoughtfully said, "To think it could cover such a distance." Molly? Redding called out twice to the dazed Molly, who finally came back to her senses. "What's wrong with you? You've been absent-minded since just now." "Nothing." Molly shook her head and withdrew her gaze from the distant end of the 8 trigrams diagram. She took a deep breath, and her hand gripping the broadsword clenched tightly. Night sky below, a darkness carrying a suspended mountain peak, slowly moving forward. Around the mountain peak, dense herds of beasts converged, numerous two-headed birds rose from the back of the beast tide, flying toward the crimson figure standing atop the mountain peak. A heavy bear pole reached out from nothingness, violently smashing down on the head of one of the two-headed birds, the terrifying force crushing it into a bloody pulp. The other bird head screeched and controlled the body to charge toward the direction of the extended bear paw, but the latter had already vanished into the void, disappearing without a trace. The next moment, a gray bird shot like lightning, instantly piercing through its body before disappearing into the night. As one two-headed bird was killed, several more flew to the mountain peak. The bird flock gathered and swirled, like a dark cloud hovering in the sky. Several figures wearing deep green protective uniforms fought against the bird flock but were gradually overwhelmed by their terrifying numbers. "Boss, there are too many of them, we can't handle this." The void white bear returned to Lin Chia's side, panting heavily, shaking his slightly swollen paw while speaking softly. Lin Chia looked at the dense mass of two-headed birds, remained silent for a moment, then sighed deeply. "I understand, leave it to me then." Lin Chia closed his eyes, and under his guidance, many workers quickly flew back into the mountain peak. Seeing this, the two-headed birds flying around the peak immediately surged toward the summit, countless Klein-level auras connecting like waves rushing toward them. Behind these two-headed birds, several divine beast-level auras rapidly approached. Lin Chia stood at the peak, waiting as the bird flock drew closer to him. When the leading two-headed bird was less than 500 meters away from him, his tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. A violent tyrant aura suddenly descended, causing the birds in the sky to shudder simultaneously. Under those majestic golden pupils, all two-headed birds felt their spirits tremble, a sense of fear rising from the depths of their hearts, with an impulse to submit to that crimson figure. Just then a low, eerie voice echoed in the air. "The big windmill turns creaking and squeaking. The scenery here is so beautiful, the sky is beautiful, the earth is beautiful, and there are happy little friends together." This chant, seemingly possessing some magical power, caused the surging bird flock to hesitate slightly. Their pupils gradually dilated, as if their souls had been taken by the song, instantly controlled. Nearly 22-headed birds, under the dual control of Tyrant's Rage and Soul Control Song, quickly changed direction under Lin Chia's command, flying out from the mountain peak and swarming towards several divine beasts. The divine beasts approaching Lin Chia were simultaneously stunned by this sight. Having already entered the divine realm, they were not affected by Lin Chia's soul control song, merely finding the sound unpleasant. But as the first two-headed bird frantically bit at their heads, spewing fire and frost, they finally realized something was wrong. Although these two-headed birds were Klein level, their combat power was vastly inferior compared to divine beasts. A tiger-like divine beast bit off a two-headed bird's neck, then smashed the other head with one paw, roaring angrily at these birds that had switched sides in battle. The black mass of birds engulfed several divine beasts, temporarily trapping them with their numerical advantage. Lin Chia seized the opportunity, maintaining his tune while continuing to control the suspended mountain peak toward another herd of beasts. They forcefully carved a bloody path through the controlled beast herds, surging toward Lin Chia one after another, with incredibly fast speed. Seeing this, Lin Chia knew he had pushed his time to the limit. He gripped Hun Bai with one hand, while the small golden dragon wrapped around his wrist quickly moved, pouring surging spiritual power into the second forbidden spell within the mountain. The eerie song abruptly stopped. Lin Chia merely chanted one syllable in a low voice, and a deep blue forbidden spell pattern on the side of the mountain instantly shone with dazzling brilliance. A visible sound wave rippled outward from the mountain peak, instantly shattering several divine beasts that were close by. From a distance, it looked like a transparent sphere suddenly exploding and expanding, covering every inch of surrounding space, even squeezing out the air. Under this sound wave, large numbers of beast herds were reduced to bloody mist, and the ground below was pulverized. In the blink of an eye, within 2 kilometers of the mountain peak, it had become a vacuum domain. Instant forbidden spell, Storm Sacred Sound. As one of the top instant forbidden spells, Storm Sacred Sound possessed destructive power surpassing Solomon's Eye, but its coverage area was less than a third of the latter. However, under Lin Chia's continuous provocation, the mountain peak had become a thorn in the eyes of the beast herds. Large numbers of divine beasts and beast herds gathered here, instantly wiped out by Storm's Sacred Sound. Although this attack only killed about 20 giant beasts, the 7 or 8 divine beasts that were shattered were enough to greatly reduce the pressure on humanity's strongest fighters. Under Lin Chia's deliberate attraction of hatred, the effect of this forbidden spell was even better than the first. After casting 2 consecutive forbidden spells, the small golden dragon on Lin Chia's wrist had mostly dissipated, but he didn't hesitate at all, directly pressing his palm against the mountain rock. A magic array outlined in fresh blood instantly covered the entire mountain peak. As these blood magic arrays gradually lit up, The blood mist of divine beasts and giant beasts killed by storm's sacred sound around the mountain peak was pulled into the array as if grabbed by an invisible hand. This blood array, like a bloodthirsty monster, instantly swallowed all the blood mist without a trace. The patterns on the array's surface quickly twisted, connecting with the blood vessels on Lin Chia's hand, and the outline of a blood-colored portal gradually formed above Lin Chia. This third forbidden spell was not a conventional destructive forbidden spell, but a special summoning type forbidden spell. Of the 3 conventional summoning magics Lin Chia knew, one could only summon randomly, one could only summon specified items, and one required appropriate sacrifices and equivalent summoning based on one's own realm. This summoning magic, classified as a forbidden spell, completely transcended these 3 summoning methods. Using a large amount of flesh and blood as sacrifice, with massive consumption of spiritual power, to attract the attention of an unknown existence outside the world, thereby causing some phenomenon beyond comprehension to descend. This was the description of this summoning forbidden spell in Merlin's forbidden spell canon. This was the summoning forbidden spell, Netherworld Whisper. Similarly, using sacrifices as consumption for summoning, the special aspect of Abyssal Whispers is that it tends toward an unknown descent, rather than forming a contract with the summoned entity. Although the descent is only one time, its effectiveness is dozens of times greater than contracted summoned creatures. No realm threshold, no need to sign a contract, relying on sacrifice to bring one-time massive destruction. From any perspective, it's a top-tier magic that completely outperforms ordinary summoning spells. However, beyond this, it also has a somewhat strange side effect. Below this forbidden spell, Merlin specifically noted, the entity attracted by Abyssal Whispers is very likely to come from the real world. The reason for its connection to this world is unknown. To be safe, try not to use Abyssal Whispers multiple times, as this may cause its gaze to lock onto the caster and accelerate its descent. This forbidden spell itself has no side effects on the caster, but instead affects the world itself. When Lin Chia first saw this passage, he instinctively felt some aversion to this forbidden spell. After all, any power has its price, and the cost of Abyssal Whispers is clearly disproportionate to its effect. If it from the real world that Merlin mentioned truly descends, who knows what might happen. However, thinking carefully, if Abyssal Whispers were truly a forbidden spell that summons evil entities, Merlin would never have included it in the grimoire. The notation also says, try not to use multiple times, meaning that using it once or twice occasionally would not cause too much impact. Merlin himself must have tried it without encountering accidents. After weighing the options, he still carved this forbidden spell on the Forbidden Mountain. After all, such a low-cost instant cast spell with tremendous destructive power is extremely rare. According to Lin Chia's estimation, if Abyssal Whispers is successfully released, its power would definitely exceed Solomon's Eye and Storm Sanctus combined, which would have an extremely important impact on the battle situation. As the blood-colored patterns on the mountain surface grew brighter, the portal above Lin Chia was forming at an astonishing speed. The moment the portal fully formed, Lin Chia keenly felt a gaze penetrating through the portal, descending upon this land. Simultaneously, an indescribable aura flowed out from behind the portal. Even without any sense of pressure or killing intent, it still made people feel an urge to prostrate in worship, like someone who has lived in a cramped underground space suddenly stepping onto the surface and witnessing the vast, boundless starry sky. That magnificent and endless spectacle caused all beings with self-awareness to uncontrollably feel panic. The moment this aura appeared, the beast tide surging outside Chinen Gate simultaneously paused. Whether giant beasts or divine beasts, all turned their heads toward the massive portal standing on the Black Mountain peak, their eyes showing unprecedented fear. What is that thing? In the divine battlefield, the gods of both countries who were fiercely fighting sensed the appearance of that aura and slightly frowned. The aura coming from behind the portal made even them feel somewhat trembling in their hearts. It was an existence that transcended the concept of God, and its aura was very unfamiliar to any pantheon. We cannot allow that thing to continue. Seeing this, an Indian main god gritted his teeth and broke away from the melee, transforming into a streak of light directly smashing toward the portal at the top of the Black Mountain, with 2 lesser gods following closely behind. Although they didn't know what exactly the existence behind the door was, the pressure it gave them was too great. If it truly crossed that threshold completely, it would definitely be a disaster. They had no idea where the Chinese gods had obtained this thing. Not only were the Indian gods puzzled, but the Chinese gods were equally confused. But when they saw that Lin Chia was standing under that door, they all felt slightly relieved. Fortunately, this thing was created by one of their own. The three gods streaked across the sky, flying directly toward the portal, with surging divine power rolling, seemingly wanting to shatter it with one strike. The raging wind of divine power made Lin Chia's cloak flutter wildly. Without saying a word, he immediately drew white slash. A reverse summoning formation opened beneath his feet, and his figure instantly disappeared from the spot. The third forbidden spell had been activated, and his mission was completely fulfilled. There was no need to risk staying here. The next moment, Lin Chia's figure appeared out of thin air behind Qingyu's black coffin. He pulled out the straight sword and looked back at the distant sky. The three gods were seen crashing into the portal, and the terrifying divine power directly shattered the entire Black Mountain peak. However, under the sweep of divine power, the red portal remained suspended in mid-air, completely unaffected. Seeing this, the Indian main god's face slightly sank. Just as he was about to strike again, a sigh came from behind the portal. With this sigh, a black shadow flew out from behind the portal. The shadow was only palm-sized, looking like a dim meteor from a distance. With its appearance, a terrifying force of law suddenly descended. The moment this shadow meteor appeared, the lesser god closest to it felt his vision blur, and then the other lesser god in the distance suddenly widened his eyes, looking at him with shock. You. What's wrong with me? Following the other's gaze, he looked down, only to see that his legs were already empty. He could clearly see that his blood and legs continued to flow normally at the neat, smooth cross-section, as if his legs were still there, just invisible to the naked eye. He instinctively reached out and felt the empty space where his legs should be, but there was nothing there. Just as he was confused, that strange force of law descended again. As the shadow meteor passed by, his body began to disappear piece by piece before everyone's eyes, as if an invisible eraser was gently sweeping across his body, ultimately leaving only an empty void. Then the second lesser god's body also began to gradually be erased. He cried out in alarm and accelerated at full speed toward the distance, but no matter how fast he flew, his body continued to be erased bit by bit. Seconds later, as the shadow meteor passed by, those remaining eyes full of terror were also completely erased. This incredible scene completely shocked the main god's mind. He could accept these two lesser gods being killed in direct combat, but this manner of death was too bizarre and too casual. They were like chalk drawings on a blackboard, simply lightly erased and completely disappeared without even a chance to resist. Just as he was feeling terrified, that shadow meteor changed direction and flew toward him again. This Indian main god felt his mind go blank, and without a word he turned and ran, pushing his divine power to the extreme, appearing dozens of kilometers away in an instant. The shadow meteor still wanted to pursue and kill him, but the gate behind it had already begun to flicker and dim. Seeing this, Lin Chia anxiously muttered to himself, "Don't chase after him. Resolving the beast tide is the most important thing." This shadow meteor must be the phenomenon beyond comprehension, described in the forbidden spell. Whether it could catch up to a main god, Lin Chia didn't know, but he knew that the gate he had sacrificed to build was about to collapse. He had activated Abyssal Whisper to eliminate the beast tide and relieve pressure on Chinen Pass. If it wasted time chasing the god, they would squander this opportunity. As if hearing Lin Chia's voice, the shadow meteor hesitated for a moment, then changed its target and flew directly toward the surrounding beast horde. As the shadow meteor approached, the beasts' bodies seemed to be erased by an invisible eraser, disappearing at an alarming rate. No matter how large they were, whether divine beasts or Klein giant beasts, they all seemed meaningless before this meteor. Wherever it went, even the densest beast tide would be carved with a blank streak. About 3 to 4 seconds later, the red gate in the sky flickered slightly and began visibly dissipating. The shadow meteor seemed to be pulled by some force, quickly flying out of the beast horde and rushing back into the gate just as it was about to disappear. With the disappearance of the gate and shadow meteor, the sky once again fell into silence. The panicked beast horde finally returned to normal, but their numbers had been significantly reduced. The shadow meteor's erasure speed was so fast that even Lin Chia couldn't count how many giant beasts it had killed, though by rough estimate, it was at least 80, including many divine beasts and 2 Indian lesser gods. The people at Chinnan Pass's front line couldn't help but gasp in shock. What kind of thing had Lin Chia unleashed? They had only seen a meteor dancing in the sky, after which Indian gods and the beast tide had disappeared one after another. The pressure on Chinnan Pass's front line sharply decreased, and looking across the beast horde, divine beasts could no longer be found. Not just them, Lin Chia himself was deeply shocked. He had expected Abyssal Whisper to be powerful, but never imagined it would directly erase 2 lesser gods and clear out a large portion of the beast tide in just 3 or 4 seconds. If it had lasted 10 more seconds, the battle situation might have been completely reversed. Unfortunately, he couldn't use Abyssal Whisper again in the short term. First, because the National Fortune Dragon had been completely consumed, and second, because he feared that the entity behind the gate might truly descend into this world. If he had any doubts before after personally using Abyssal Whisper, he was now certain that everything Merlin had said was true. The moment the gate formed and the sighing sound appeared, he heard a whisper from behind the gate. A little more, just a little more refinement, and I can cross over. Without its main body entering this world, it had thrown out a shadow meteor that caused such terrible destruction in just seconds. How terrifying would it be if its true form descended? Lin Chia resolved to temporarily seal away Abyssal Whisper, and turned his attention to the battlefield before him. After releasing 3 forbidden spells in succession, Chinnan Pass's resistance time against the beast tide had been continuously extended. By the current situation, they should be able to hold out for a few more minutes. Just as Lin Chia was about to charge into the battlefield with the Kusanagi sword, his body trembled slightly. He seemed to sense something and looked down at his wrist, where the last trace of National Fortune energy wrapped around it was rapidly fluctuating, as if excited. The other members of Night Curtain team also noticed this and showed puzzled expressions. The Great Xia's National Fortune has changed, Lin Chia murmured. It seems the battle of national fortunes has reached a conclusion? India. In the rolling mist, fragments of national fortune fell from the sky like golden meteors. Amidst the countless shattered Buddha statues, a badly wounded figure pulled a long spear from a half-broken Buddha head, the weapon trembling and humming. The broken armor slowly straightened as Hua Tsubing wiped blood from the corner of his mouth. In his sharp eyes was clearly reflected the collapsing pillar of India's national fortune. The national fortune pillar that once supported the heavens had now collapsed by half, while the Great Xia's golden dragon behind him, though somewhat diminished, still emanated a terrifying aura, its surging fortune devouring the scattered Buddha statue fragments in the sky, continuously repairing its injuries. These Indian gods actually prepared so many Buddha statues. If we hadn't hidden our trump cards too, we might have fallen here. Li Qingqiang staggered out from the ruins, his flowery shirt completely tattered, his toed sunglasses lost somewhere, looking utterly wretched like a beggar. This time, we've shattered nearly 60% of their national fortune at once. Should this count as a major victory? Wang Qing asked, holding a long whip as she slowly walked behind Hua Tsubing. Hua Tsubing stared at the broken national fortune pillar and calmly replied. National fortune is intangible, accumulating bit by bit. In ordinary times it might not matter, but now during the divine war between our nations, weak fortune leads to unfavorable battles. In this fight, we've cut down 5.5 of India's national fortune. It's certainly a major victory. Hearing these words, expressions of satisfaction appeared on the faces of the other heroic spirits. Next, it's up to the celestial venerable. Tang Yuxing turned to look at the distant sky, where an ancient, solemn temple and a magnificent, enormous celestial court were facing each other in the clouds. Thunderous explosions emanated from within the temple. Both divine realms trembled simultaneously as cracks appeared on the temple's surface. The auras of 2 supreme gods mixed with the essence of their divine realms continued to clash. Inside the temple, the primordial heavenly lord held the essence of the celestial court, with golden flowers blooming in the void, turning the surrounding space into a golden sea. The battle of national fortunes has been lost. I'm afraid your Indian gods will not get what you desire from this expedition. The primordial heavenly lord sensed the change in national fortune, and a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. In midair, the four-faced Brahma sat on a lotus flower, the eyes on his three visible faces rippling almost imperceptibly. The divine statue's face twisted slightly in rage, and three deep roars merged together, producing a thunderous sound as the lotus flower beneath him violently trembled. Destruction. Sensing Brahma's anger, the primordial heavenly lord coldly snorted, as strands of heavenly court essence flowed from his palm, wrapping around his fingertips. He joined his right index and middle fingers together like a sword, tearing open a gap in the raging supreme divine pressure. His Taoist robe danced in the wind as his steps forward remained steady as a mountain. With your national fortune severed, can you still win this battle of essences? The primordial heavenly lord calmly asked. As the primordial heavenly lord's hand fell, that strand of golden thread instantly broke through space and collided with the lotus divine throne beneath Brahma. The two divine national essences brutally crashed against each other, the shockwaves nearly shattering the massive pillars inside the divine temple. Outside the temple, countless wisps of spiritual energy poured down from the great Xia heavenly court, as if sensing the anomaly in the essence. Crane calls echoed from all corners of the heavenly court, piercing through the clouds. The fine cracks on the surface of the divine temple gradually became ferocious, dense fissures tearing through the top of the temple. Falling stones rolled into the battlefield below, instantly turned to dust by the shockwaves of the two colliding essences. The divine national essence is the bond that maintains the connection between mythical gods and their faithful followers, with countless ties to national fortune. Now that India's national fortune had been cut by nearly 60%, the essence could no longer maintain its original power and began to continuously decline. In this evenly matched battle of essences, any slight disadvantage would be infinitely magnified on the battlefield. As those golden threads connected to form a sword, a small crack appeared on the surface of the lotus divine throne beneath Brahma. This crack was only the size of a fingernail and hardly noticeable on the entire lotus throne, but for the entire Indian pantheon, it was an absolutely devastating blow. With the essence breaking, vast amounts of faith power gushed out from the crack. The once impenetrable Indian pantheon now had a breach, like an ant hole in a 1,000-mile-long embankment. Dense cracks spread from this initial breach, instantly covering half of the lotus divine throne. The four-faced Brahma's eyes widened in anger. Under the sweep of supreme divine might, small suns containing terrifying energy were created from nothingness, only to be shattered one by the golden flowers filling the sky. The primordial heavenly lord stood firmly above the ocean of golden flowers, holding the heavenly court's essence sword, and spoke calmly. Brahma, today I shall ensure that all Indian gods go without return. Vij. Bang. As the small sword formed by golden threads cut through a corner of the lotus divine throne, the cracks covering its surface burst open inch by inch, exploding into nothingness. The divine temple's essence shattered. Chinen Gate. Divine battlefield. Within the defensive line of Indian gods surging with divine power, 5 figures charged at the forefront, forcibly tearing open a gap and arduously advancing step by step toward the mother beasts in the deepest part. Sun Wukong, Tai Jinren, Yuding Jinren, and Guangqing Zi joined forces to contain the large number of Indian deities coming to aid, while Zhou Ping alone charged at the front with his sword, trying to carve a bloody path through the encirclement of 3 main god-level beings. In this all-out counterattack, the great Xia gods had already killed more than half of the Indian deities. The Xia gods with remaining battle strength gradually formed an encirclement, continuously compressing the space of the remaining Indian gods. However, these Indian gods seemed determined to protect the mother beasts, still clinging to a glimmer of hope of breaking through Chinen Gate to contain the great Xia gods and turn the tide. With a crisp breaking sound emanating from within the Indian gods' bodies, their forms slightly faltered, and their expressions immediately turned grim. They looked back toward the distant, empty gate, where an ancient temple was gradually disintegrating within the swirling mist. 2 divine shadows burst out from within, rapidly flying toward the sky. Their essence has shattered. Seeing this, Tai Jinren's face lit up with joy. Having lost their divine national essence, all the Indian deities present began to experience declining divine power, and their realms became unstable. Seeing this, Guangqingzi seized the opportunity, bit his tongue, and spat a mouthful of essence blood onto the surface of the heaven-overturning seal. The seal transformed into a beam of light that directly shattered the form of one main god, opening a gap for Zhou Ping. "Seize the chance. They're almost finished," Guangqingzi shouted to Zhou Ping. Zhou Ping quickly avoided an attack from one main god, his eyes flashing with determination. He released the sword in his hand, imbuing it with surging sword intent that transformed into a beam of light slashing toward one main god. At the same time he closed his eyes and placed his hand on his chest, where a glass-like heart was beating powerfully beneath. As a thin sword energy leaked from his fingertips, cutting through flesh and gently piercing that heart, a drop of blood seeped from the glass heart, emitting a faint silver light. The moment this drop of blood appeared, a sword cry sounded from within Zhou Ping's body. Billowing sword energy tore his upper garment, and sword-like fine lines beneath his skin emitted a silver glow. His form made a sharp piercing sound in the air, instantly breaking through the void and charging toward the rear of the Indian gods. His figure flashed through the air, with the phantom of a long sword faintly visible inside his body. This was his true form carrying his sword Dao, the dragon elephant sword. When the dragon elephant sword emerged, it instantly tore through the defense of the last Indian main god, flying over dozens of kilometers in an instant. Dense waves of divine power frantically surged toward him, but all were shattered by the sword's edge. Several Indian main gods attacked simultaneously but couldn't stop this sword, allowing him to forcibly break through to the core where the few mother beasts were. The sword Dao was born specifically to slay gods. The dragon elephant sword, carrying Zhou Ping's soul and Dao, was absolutely the bane of all deities. Only Zhou Ping could break through the final defense line in such extreme circumstances and reach the vicinity of those mother beasts. The dragon elephant sword gently vibrated, releasing endless waves of sword energy that instantly tore the nearest mother beast to pieces. Then its true form traced an arc through the air, piercing through the head of the second mother beast. In the blink of an eye, two mother beasts were instantly killed, directly eliminating half of the beast tied at its source. Just as Zhou Ping was about to kill the third one, an invisible ripple spread around him. Zhou Ping recognized this energy fluctuation. Whenever a deity died on the battlefield, this ripple would appear, instantly moving their corpse into the mother beasts' mouths to become their nourishment. The dragon elephant sword rapidly changed direction, avoiding the invisible ripple. The next moment, a jade hand extended from within the ripple, reaching for the dragon elephant sword's hilt, but ultimately grasped nothing. A light sound of surprise came from within the ripple. Just as the jade hand was about to withdraw into the ripple, a woman wearing a gold-threaded purple-patterned robe stepped out from the void above, holding a mirror directly facing the direction where the ripple had spread. "Finally caught you," Queen Mother of the West narrowed her eyes. Since becoming aware of this ripple's existence, the Queen Mother of the West had been looking for an opportunity to expose it, though she wasn't certain whether it was a deity or a special divine artifact. It wasn't until she was forced to reveal herself while guarding the mother beasts under Zhou Ping's pressure that the Queen Mother seized her chance. Under the reflection of the Kunlun mirror, the jade hand that was about to retract into the ripple suddenly froze in midair. Zhou Ping seized the opportunity and directly killed all the remaining mother beasts. As the roars of giant beasts echoed through the air, all the mother beasts at the source of the beast tide perished. Their swollen abdomens deflated like balloons, turning into dried corpses within seconds. At the same time, the Queen Mother flipped the Kunlun mirror, sending out a divine light. The figure frozen in the ripple was forcibly dragged out by an invisible hand, revealing a goddess sculpted entirely from white jade exposed to the air. The goddess raised her head and exchanged a glance with the Queen Mother. Her jade face showed no emotion as she formed a strange seal with her 10 fingers. Countless ripples like a blooming lotus flower spread from beneath her feet, quickly engulfing her form, seemingly about to disappear without a trace. The Queen Mother's brow furrowed slightly. Just as she was about to activate the Kunlun mirror again, a divine figure wearing imperial robes slowly emerged from beside her. The divine figure gently waved his hand, and a pagoda descended, expanding dramatically in the wind to become a massive golden mountain. It slowly rotated above the white jade goddess, with a terrifying gravitational force surging from the bottom of the pagoda, forcibly pulling out the figure that had already merged into the ripple. As his hand pressed downward, the pagoda crashed down violently, suddenly imprisoning the white jade goddess within its body. Beams of golden light radiated from each level of the pagoda, like a giant lock hanging outside the tower. After suppressing the white jade goddess, the pagoda rose lightly into the sky, rapidly shrinking and spinning back into the palm of the divine figure wearing imperial robes. This goddess possesses strange powers. Only this Hautian tower can imprison her. I entrust it to your care. The Jade Emperor handed the pagoda to the Queen Mother, who nodded slightly and said softly, "Yes." The Jade Emperor surveyed the battlefield. Now that the Indian gods had lost the source of their divine temple, their power began to decline. Under the siege of the great Xia gods, the battle was completely one-sided. Some Indian deities were already trying to break through the blockade and escape beyond the borders of Great Xia. The great Xia gods who still had fighting strength were focusing on eliminating the remaining Indian deities, while others had maximized their speed to pursue the fleeing Indian gods in all directions. Just then the Jade Emperor's deep voice resonated from the sky. "Do not pursue a desperate enemy. Protecting our great Xia citizens takes priority." Yes. The many great Xia gods who had given chase immediately changed direction, rushing toward the rear of the surging beast tide, slaughtering these hybrid divine beasts from behind. More great Xia gods disengaged from the encirclement battle and charged toward the Chin'an Gate front line. Clang! Left Qing barely deflected a divine beast's claws with his straight sword, retreating several steps. The tiger's mouth of his hand was already split from the sword hilt, with fresh blood dripping from his fingertips onto the ground. The prolonged high-intensity combat had almost drained all his spiritual power and physical strength. Now, let alone killing a divine beast, even dodging their attacks was extremely difficult. The same situation was happening to all the human elites on the front line and the Night Watchers fighting in the rear. Several giant beasts had broken through the defense line, creating breaches in the outer wall of Chin'an Gate. Dense gunfire and roars came from behind the outer wall, the last volunteer army of ordinary people using their bodies to delay the giant beast's advance. Just then, as if sensing something, he suddenly looked up at the sky. He saw streams of light from the distant divine battlefield cutting across the sky at an astonishing speed, flying toward Chin'an Gate. Dense magical treasures and spells swept across the sky, precisely piercing every giant beast that had crossed the outer wall of Chin'an Gate. As a figure wearing a black imperial robe descended from the sky, the divine beast entangled with Left Qing was instantly blasted into a rain of blood. That figure, wielding the 6 paths of reincarnation, lightly hooked a finger, and a silver ring instantly expanded, directly cutting in half all divine beasts within a 3-kilometer radius. Blood mist scattered and miserable beast howls came from the rear of the beast tide. Left Qing's straight sword fell to the ground, his blood-covered hands trembling weakly. Looking at the divine figure rapidly flying toward him, a relieved smile finally appeared at the corner of his mouth. He knew that in this battle they had ultimately won. Fengdu Emperor Li Diang slowly turned his head, looking at the blood-covered Left Qing before him with complex eyes. "Commander Left, sorry to have kept you waiting." Left Qing shook his head, no longer having the strength to speak. He weakly sat down and bitterly looked behind him. The battered outer wall of Chin'an Gate was already dyed red with blood. On the ground in front of it, countless dark red corpses and severed beast limbs covered the wilderness. Only a small portion of figures still barely maintained their stance, but their bodies were already at their limits. At least 70% of the Night Watchers had died in front of this pass. The descent of the great Xia gods directly blocked almost 90% of the beast tide. Without the mother beast's unlimited reproduction, killing the remaining giant divine beasts was just a matter of time. The only thing that needed to be dealt with were some giant beasts still fighting with the Night Watchers in front of the outer wall. A shadow of night moved rapidly across the battlefield. Lin Chia's sword light cut down the heads of one giant beast after another. Lightning from the sky struck continuously, precisely harvesting the lives of each giant beast. Under the cleanup of 3 special teams and the great Xia gods, these giant beasts were quickly wiped out. Finally, it's over. As the last giant beast was pierced by Red Tassel's spear, when Chima finally relaxed, suddenly sitting on the ground, his pale face showing no trace of color. The rose-colored flames around Red Tassel dissipated. She steadied herself with her spear case, supporting the equally exhausted Molly with one hand, and let out a long breath. As the Taiji Bagua diagram under their feet gradually faded, a fat figure in the distance supported himself on his knees, breathing heavily. In the previous battle, 100 Miles Fatty had directly channeled the national fortune from the small golden dragon, covering most of the battlefield with his Taiji Bagua diagram, constantly killing giant beasts for all the night watchers within the diagram and sharing the pressure. Under this terrible consumption, even with the national fortune supporting him, he was somewhat overwhelmed. But thanks to his presence, a considerable number of night watchers in this battlefield survived the beast tide, making everyone remember the deep red figure standing in the center of the Bagua diagram. The chaotic battlefield gradually returned to calm. Large numbers of medical personnel poured out from Chinnan Gate, treading through blood and corpses, doing their utmost to save the lives of survivors. The night sky gradually dispersed, revealing its original dim yellow hue. On the devastated land, countless figures in white were carrying stretchers, quickly moving back and forth inside and outside Chinnan Gate. Although Chinnan Gate had abundant medical resources, they were somewhat insufficient in the face of such large-scale war casualties. Transport planes carrying numerous medical personnel and equipment from other war outposts were slowly landing inside the gate, while night watchers with minor injuries supported each other as they returned to Chinnan Gate. "Sister Hongying, are you all okay?" Lin Chia finished clearing the battlefield and quickly walked over to Hongying and the others. "I'm fine, but when Chima's mental power suffered severe backlash and he's lost consciousness." Hongying carried the unconscious Wen Chima on her back, shaking her head bitterly. Lin Chia's mental power scanned Wen Chima's body. After confirming there was no life-threatening danger, he sighed slightly in relief, took him from Hongying's back and said seriously, "The logistics team should have someone who can treat this condition. I'll take him to see them in a bit." "Molly, are you okay?" Lin Chia turned to look at Molly, who was walking alongside Hongying. Molly was slightly startled, then shook her head and said, "I only have superficial wounds, nothing serious." Molly's peripheral vision swept the surroundings as if searching for something. She looked at Lin Chia, hesitating to speak. "I'll take Chima for treatment first. See you inside the gate later." Lin Chia nodded, then carrying Wen Chima, transformed into a streak of light and quickly disappeared behind Chinnan Gate's outer wall. After delivering Wen Chima to the treatment room, Lin Chia had just walked out when he saw a familiar figure standing on the outer wall, seemingly gazing into the distance. "Peng Peng, what are you looking at?" Lin Chia walked to his side and followed his gaze, his expression becoming somewhat strange. Nothing at all." Bailey Peng Peng turned his head away, but after a moment's pause he couldn't help but ask, "Her injuries, are they serious?" Bailey Peng Peng didn't specify who she was, but Lin Chia knew exactly who he meant. "Just superficial wounds, nothing major." Lin Chia looked at him suspiciously. "If you're so worried, why not go see her yourself? This isn't like when we were in Guangshan. You're now Bailey Peng Peng of the Nightfall team, almost unrivaled below the divine realm, and the scars on your face have completely healed from Gunji's medicinal bath on the island. What are you still afraid of?" Lin Chia clearly remembered that after resolving the Belkrand incident years ago, Bailey Peng Peng had actively invited Molly to meet in Guangshan City. However, after the incident with the Bailey family that nearly cost him his life and left his face scarred, Bailey Peng Peng ultimately didn't have the courage to meet Molly. Years had passed and now Bailey Peng Peng was at the peak of Klein, his facial scars healed. From any perspective he was qualified to stand by Molly's side. "Have you changed your mind?" Lin Chia asked with a strange expression. No, Bailey Peng Peng immediately shook his head. He opened his mouth to say something but couldn't utter a word. Seeing this, Lin Chia didn't press further, only reminding him, "The matter between you two still needs to be resolved by yourselves. But I think since you initiated it back then, you should give her and your former selves an answer no matter what." Bailey Peng Peng stood in place, silent. While they were talking, and Qingyu, Jiang Er and Chao Yuan also arrived one after another. None of them had significant injuries, but they were mentally and physically exhausted after the great battle. "Chia, something doesn't seem right," and Qingyu pushed up his glasses and spoke seriously. "What's wrong?" "Look there." And Qingyu pointed to the sky where several great Xia divine shadows were flying past, seemingly on alert for something. We clearly won, but the great Xia gods don't seem to have stood down. Instead they've split into two groups, one resting above Chinen Gate, the other constantly patrolling the great Xia border. Seeing this, Lin Qia's brows furrowed slightly. In the recent divine battle, the Indian gods had been utterly defeated, with their divine realm's source destroyed and nearly 80% of their deities killed in battle. Even if some remnants had escaped back into the mist, it shouldn't warrant such vigilance from the great Xia gods. Could it be that this war wasn't over yet? Let's go ask. Lin Qia spotted Suqing, his body wrapped in bandages, walking out of the medical room and quickly headed toward him. According to statistics in this battle at Chinen Gate, 82 night watchers died in battle, 19 were severely injured and disabled. These individuals basically can't continue night watcher activities anymore. Currently, those who survived and remain combat-capable number less than 20. Military and civilian casualties are still being tallied, though they should be relatively better. A night watcher pushed bandage-wrapped Suqing in a wheelchair out of the medical room, reporting the casualty statistics as they moved. Hearing these numbers, Suqing's body trembled slightly. After a moment of silence he asked, "What about the great Xia gods?" The great Xia gods also suffered heavy casualties. News just came from the Star Lord that 5 of the 12 golden immortals have died in battle, 3 are severely injured and have lost combat capability, and the death rate among other deities is also around 30%. That final desperate counterattack almost completely annihilated the Indian gods, but the backlash on Great Xia was also extreme. Currently, the combat power that the Great Xia gods can mobilize is less than half of what it was originally. Suqing closed his eyes and sighed deeply. The war isn't over yet, so we can't hold grand funeral ceremonies for the fallen night watchers. Send people to return their remains to their respective stations, erect tombstones and give them proper burials. When everything settles, we'll officially honor their merits. Yes. As they were speaking, several figures wearing deep red cloaks approached. Commander Sua. Lin Qia looked at Suqing's bandage-covered body and asked, "Your injuries?" "Don't worry, I'm not dying yet." Suqing forced a bitter smile. "What do you need? Is this war truly over?" Seeing the concern in Lin Qia's eyes, Suqing sighed lightly and shook his head, saying, "That I don't know either." Lin Qia was slightly taken aback. Before you arrived, a group of people calling themselves hidden gods came to Great Xia on Si Xiaonan's orders to deliver a warning. Suqing paused for a moment. They said that Olympus seems to have been preparing something all along. Now that Great Xia and the Temple of Gods are both severely weakened, if I were them I wouldn't miss this opportunity either. Olympus. Hearing this name, everyone's expressions grew solemn.